to the Adventist Healthcare and You podcast. I'm Shanna.
And I'm Nimit.
Hello, Nimit. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. And welcome to all of our listeners. We are excited to welcome a new guest today, Dr. Jatinder Sekhan, who's the Chief of Gastroenterology Department at Adventist Healthcare, Shady Grove Medical Center. Welcome, Dr. Sekhan.
Thank you for having me.
You're bringing some really great information today all about colorectal cancer screenings.
Yes, I am. And this is the month for colorectal cancer awareness. And as you know, this is one of the hot topics in the country, one of the leading causes of death from cancer.
Yes, and more younger people, younger adults are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer.
That's very true.
So maybe we can just start right there. Is there any scientific evidence or anything that might be pointing to the fact that younger adults are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer?
So, as you know, colon cancer is about 153,000 people are diagnosed every year with colon cancer, colorectal cancer, and out of which about 53,000 people die from it. And so it's one of the leading causes of cancer death here in this country. And that's why this is so important now. And for many years, we were aware of seeing sporadic younger people coming in, less than 50 years with sometimes quite advanced cancer. And the data started getting collected. And then about a year ago, the U.S. Preventive Task Force, they made the recommendation that instead of 50 years being the limit, the lower limit of doing colorectal cancer screening, we should start at 45 for healthy people with no family history or other comorbidities, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So went from 50 to 45 and 5 years younger.
That is very true. And we are seeing way more polyps and awareness in the population. And we are seeing a few cancer pickups in my practice and several other practices whom I'm talking with, you know.
Wow.
Okay.
So tell us what you do at Adventist Healthcare
Yes.
and how does it help our patients in our community?
First and foremost is the patient awareness. You know, first they have to be aware of there are many modalities available to them to prevent this cancer, and it's a totally preventable cancer. It starts from patient awareness. It starts from the primary care, making them aware of the different options which they can avail of. And all of them are covered by insurance. Maryland we are fortunate that this is 100% covered in the state. And once they have had that conversation with the primary cares and they're aware of and they've done a little more research on their own, then they come to people like us. And from our standpoint, there are different things which can be done. And first and foremost is a colonoscopy, which is a gold standard. Okay. For detection, for prevention, surveillance of cancer.
What are some of the different options? You mentioned that there are some options. Obviously, the colonoscopy is the gold standard. What are some other options?
So the whole idea is that the patient or the normal population should get some sort of test to help detect and prevent colon cancer. And it started about 30 years ago when initially the thought was that you start with a sigmoidoscopy because the data available said that, well, if you do a sigmoidoscopy, which is looking at the left colon, it saves lives. And slowly it evolved over time and initially, it was stool hemicals. Anybody would give a little sample of stool and they tested for blood. And then it evolved into one of the options is now Cologuard, which is a little more advanced than a simple stool test. Of all the options, there are two options which are considered class 1, which is a colonoscopy and stool hemical on a yearly basis. Cologuard is the one which we generally encourage people who can't get a colonoscopy because of age, frailty and all that stuff. Or some people who don't want a colonoscopy. And that's one of the things which is, as you can see, and hear on TV being promoted also by a lot of interested parties. Mm-hmm. That entails sending a sample to an outside lab, and then they test it, and then they send the results to your physician. Now, you got to understand that's not the best test. That is one of the tests, which is better than doing nothing. But on the other hand, it can detect 92% of cancers, but that means you already have a colon cancer. The problem with that test is it only detects about 42 or 43% of people with advanced polyps, and they don't even detect these smaller polyps. But from our standpoint, as you asked, what are the other options? This is one of the options which you say, well, if you're not going to do a colonoscopy, do something. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the some things we do,
Okay. But if it does detect something, you still need to go in for a colonoscopy to actually see what's going on, right?
So if any of the other tests, there are many of those, including, capsule, including a CT cholangiography, CT colonography. And if any of those tests are abnormal, then you have to go and get a colonoscopy, which is a diagnostic and therapeutic test. If you detect anything at the time, you can remove it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about colonoscopies a little bit. They're not the most pleasant thing, but they're so important. So what's the typical process for a colonoscopy? How can we encourage people to get it? They're not as bad as they used to be.
So the biggest inhibiting factor, I would say that too. The biggest inhibiting factor is fear of the unknown. People think, and there's hearsay going around, oh, it's terrible, it's tough. Relatively, it's fairly straightforward process. You do have to have a liquid diet a day before, and then you drink this prep, which, by the way, these preps have gotten much better from several years ago. They taste better and they can be tolerated better. And you drink that, which basically cleans you up. And once you're clean, you go to the surgery center or to the hospital where they do the procedure. And the procedure takes typically about 15, 20 minutes, longer if there are polyps to be removed or other growths to be removed. All this is done under sedation. So the process is totally painless. People generally at the end of the procedure are extremely happy and say, well, if that's what it is, I'm going to tell our neighbors and our friends.
My husband had to have an early one. He has a family history and he's at high risk for polyps. And so he said the same thing after. He's like, it wasn't as bad. He's like, I went to sleep and I woke up. I felt great.
I'm also glad those preps tasting got better. When I first became a nurse, that was the number one complaint patients used to have, is that it just didn't taste the best. So I'm glad over the years it got better tasting.
My spouse said the same. He's like, I thought it was gonna. Everybody told me it tasted terrible. I don't think it was that bad. He's not that hard to please. So.
Well, there you go. There's a straight testament right here.
Yeah.
It used to be a high volume, and now it's a low volume. Also, they have tried changing the taste and all. The only problem is that you can't change too many of the ingredients because we got to be careful that they don't affect the kidneys, the liver, or other, the blood pressure and diabetes, and also. So they have to play within certain parameters to make these preps also.
So you mentioned polyps, multiple times. So what happens if you find polyps in a colonoscopy? Like, what is the next step? Like, does that mean they have cancer, or what are some of the things around them?
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, and say it's so interesting. You can actually remove them right there and begin to take action.
So polyp in a generic term is a little growth which you see in the colon, and we call it a polyp. And we know by history of progression that these are the things which lead on to, as they slowly grow bigger, they turn into cancer. So the whole hypothesis is that if you go and you find these growths and you remove them, you basically prevent a cancer. Chance of finding polyps in normal population, about 30%. More, plus minus, depending on male, female, ethnicity, and all that stuff, These growths happen in the colon, and so when you go in during colonoscopy, you have various instruments you can use to sort of cut them out, burn them, remove them. And basically, at the end of the procedure, when the patient wakes up, he's basically got a normal-looking colon after the procedure,
Okay.
Do you typically test those polyps for cancerous cells?
Polyps can be benign and they can be precancerous, and some of the polyps can have cancer cells. So depending on what we see at the time of removal, in fact, all of the polyps are sent for pathology. Sometimes we can see and say, well, these are dangerous-looking polyps and they need a little bit of care, this, that. And you go in and you remove the tissue around it at the time of the procedure also. But typically, like you asked, all of them are tested. Depending on the test, what sort of polyps they are, and the further surveillance intervals are determined.
So not every polyp is cancerous. It has a potential, but not every one.
Some of the polyps are benign, but vast majority of the polyps are, about 70%, I would say, are precancerous.
Okay, so really important to catch them.
Very true.
How often does someone need a colonoscopy?
So if you have a colonoscopy and that's all clean and there's nothing wrong, at the end of the day, the doctor and you are both happy, you say, well, I'll shake your hand and I'll come back after 10 years. So it's a long interval. This is one of the class 1 cancer prevention strategies. 10 years is a long interval, and but, the amount of lives it can save is tremendous.
Yeah. So if you can catch it on that first one, and then you can be good for almost 10 years.
You're good for 10 years.
Yeah, that's great.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody has detected cancer, and if they do have colon cancer, what are some of the available treatments now?
So if the patient is lucky, if the cancer is in a polyp and we remove the polyp and there's no cancer cells at the margin it hasn't invaded to a certain depth, then you basically have cured a cancer. It happens in, I wouldn't say the majority, in the minority of the cases. On the other hand, if there is already cancer there, you can stage the cancer to some extent, how long it is, where it is. You can tattoo it for the surgeons to come in later on. You can get pathology from there. You can get, sometimes these cancers also have lesions in the rest of the colon. You can remove those at the same time. So there are many things you can do at the time of the colonoscopy. Later on, depending on, again, the size, the depth, the further staging of the cancer, if it's spread from the colon or if it's confined to that, the first option is always to completely remove it surgically.
I like what you said, though, that there's options. When you can catch it early, there's options.
Very true.
Yeah.
Early detection and early prevention and cure should be always thought of and hoped for.
Yeah. So encourage everybody listening, if you are 45 years and older at average risk, talk to your primary care doctor, get your colonoscopy scheduled. And if you are at higher risk, what are some high risk factors that may indicate that you would need an earlier screening?
So if you have a family history of colon cancer, or if you have a family history of advanced polyps, then the typical age is starting at age 40 or 10 years before the index case. Say, for example, if somebody's father had cancer at, say, 45, then children and his siblings should start at age 35, 10 years before the index case.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to let our listeners know about colorectal health or digestive health?
Well, like I said before, this is one of the most common cancer killers, and it's a totally preventable cancer. I think awareness is more important. Talking with your primary care doctor is very important, so you know the options, and coming at the right time, as having a procedure every 10 years should not be a big deal because it saves your life, you know?
Yeah, not at all. Every 10 years.
Yeah. And I like what you said earlier, you're curing the cancer right there, taking care of it. So that's important to remember too, that you're taking a step like that.
Very true.
Yeah. So, well, we always like to end our episodes by asking our physician experts, what advice do you have for someone to live a happy, healthy life?
Well-balanced life, including a well-balanced diet and sense of inner peace.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. Inner peace.
Inner peace.
Like
yes,
that.
I like that. Everybody search for that. That's so important. So, well, thank you, Dr. Sekhan. We really appreciate your time today and all this wonderful information that you brought us today. Nimit, anything before we close out?
No, I think we got great valuable information.
I agree. So don't forget, talk to your primary care doctor about colorectal cancer screenings at your next visit, or schedule your visit and talk about all the screenings that you might need. Thank you, Dr. Sekhan. We hope you'll come back again and talk to us again about maybe another topic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. To find information about Dr. Sekhan, visit adventisthealthcare.com, click on Find a Doctor. Information will also be available in today's show notes. And we'd love to hear from you. You can let us know if you like the podcast by leaving a review, or you can email podcast@adventisthealthcare.com and let us know what healthcare topics you want to know more about. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get all of our new episodes. Thank you, and be well.